Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of the Legal Lens podcast. Today, we'll be exploring the topic of chartered legal executives. One of our colleagues discussed this recently, so I'm going to build on that conversation by offering some additional thoughts on whether Canada should consider adopting a chartered legal executive model. Let's start with a refresher on the basics. So, who are chartered legal executives? In England and Wales, they are authorized lawyers who specialize in specific areas of law. They are regulated by SILEX, which operates independently from the Solicitors Regulation Authority and the Bar Standards Board, the regulators for solicitors and barristers, respectively. Today, there are currently two qualification routes to become a chartered legal executive, the legacy route and the new standards route. The legacy route will be fully phased out by December 31st of 2028 and replaced by the modernized new standards route. This new pathway aligns with the SILEX professional qualification, or CPQ framework, which includes the foundation, advanced, and professional stages. Completing all three stages leads to qualification as a chartered legal executive, and there's also an apprenticeship option available. Since our colleague previously covered the details of the qualification process, I won't revisit them here. Now, when we compare chartered legal executives with the Canadian model of traditional lawyers, some key differences in their role and training become clear. Chartered legal executives are licensed in defined areas of law. Their training is work integrated, allowing candidates to qualify in 5 to 7 years at a total cost of roughly £13,000 or approximately $24,000 Canadian. A major advantage is the opportunity to gain meaningful legal work experience while completing the academic requirements. In contrast, Canadian lawyers are licensed to practice across all areas of law with no scope limitations. The training pathway is academically intensive that includes an undergraduate degree, a 3-year law degree, 1 year of articling, and bar admission. This process generally takes 8 years to complete at a total cost of $80,000 Canadian. Now, there are certainly some advantages to the charter legal executive model. First, the tuition cost is significantly lower. Second, access to the profession is broader via an open registration system, unlike Canada's highly competitive law school admissions process, which has an average acceptance rate of just 11%. Third, the path to attaining a license is shorter and in some cases can be accelerated, whereas the traditional Canadian pathway has fixed time requirements. And finally, it provides several routes to qualification, unlike the single track used for traditional lawyers. But there are also some notable disadvantages. First, charter legal executives may face negative perceptions compared with Canada's unified recognition of the lawyer designation. Second, their scope of practice is limited. Traditional lawyers may eventually choose to specialize, but they still have the flexibility to practice in any area of law. Third, the boundaries of the permitted services can create confusion. For example, a recent UK case held that mere employment by a person who is authorized is not sufficient for the employee to conduct litigation, even under supervision. This ruling has significant implications for charter legal executives involved in litigation and highlights ongoing uncertainty around the limits of their authority. And finally, the model risks creating a two-tiered legal profession. Turning to other legal roles in Canada, we have licensed paralegals in Ontario and law clerks. Ontario's licensed paralegals, regulated by the Law Society of Ontario, have a narrow, well-defined scope of practice and number roughly 11,000 members across the province. Notably, despite being introduced in 2007, no other province has adopted a comparable licensing system. In fact, in 2024, the Law Society of British Columbia strongly opposed a new bill that would have created a new regulator for lawyers and paralegals in that province. The Law Society described the proposal as a seriously flawed regulatory model and even signaled a willingness to pursue constitutional litigation if the bill moved forward. That response sends a very clear message. Law clerks, on the other hand, are not licensed to provide independent legal services and generally work under lawyer supervision. When considering the charter legal executive model, the most compelling benefit is its ability to allow working professionals, such as paralegals and law clerks, to leverage on the job experience toward professional accreditation. And that leads us to the key question: should Canada pursue a charter legal executive model? Well, there are several key Canadian hurdles that must be considered in implementing such a model. First, with respect to legislation, unlike England and Wales, which has a national regulator, Canada's constitution assigns legislative authority over the regulation of the legal profession to the provinces. Second, from a regulatory perspective, while the Federation of Law Societies of Canada coordinates national standards, each province ultimately self regulates the profession and makes its own licensing decisions. As we saw with the Law Society of British Columbia's strong opposition to licensing paralegals, it is likely that other law societies would also oppose any expansion of license rules within the profession, including a charter legal executive model. Third, unlike the legal executive concept, which has existed in England and Wales since 1963, and in a system where solicitors and barristers are regulated separately, Canada has a long-standing unified model in which lawyer is recognized as a single professional designation. Breaking that mold would be difficult. And finally, geography matters. Although Canada and England and Wales have similar lawyer to population ratios, roughly 1 per 300 people, Canada's population is far more dispersed, making the charter legal executive model impractical for specialized roles. In smaller communities, lawyers typically provide a broad range of services to meet diverse local needs. That makes the rule defined by specialization far less practical. To sum it up, Canada should not pursue a charter legal executive model. Beyond the first three barriers that we've already discussed, maintaining a clear distinction between fully licensed lawyers and supervised legal professionals is simpler, safer, and more transparent for clients. And diversifying positions within the profession does not necessarily improve access to justice. For example, a 2025 news article reported that despite Ontario having over 57,000 lawyers and 11,000 paralegals, the sheer number of legal professionals has not translated into efficient court proceedings or widespread access to legal representation. The article concluded that Canada must find ways to better leverage its existing pool of professionals through comprehensive reform rather than simply increasing numbers. Thank you for listening. That concludes today's episode. Until next time.